Those words hit me like a thunderbolt, shattering everything I thought I knew about my family, my life, and the person I married. Imagine waking up one morning to the woman you love, your wife, looking at your child with eyes full of confusion, suspicion, and something darker, fear. She doesn't just fail to recognize our daughter. She insists the little girl living with us isn't really her. That the real child, the one she remembers, has somehow disappeared without a trace. Now, before you jump to any conclusions or dismiss this as just a moment of confusion or stress, let me tell you this. This isn't just about memory loss or a bad day. It's something much deeper, something I never expected, and something that has pulled me into a mystery I can barely comprehend. And in this video, you're going to hear everything, from the first chilling moment my wife's eyes told a story of something lost, to the strange, unexplained signs that followed, all the way to the secrets that began to unravel in the shadows of our seemingly normal life. I promise you, by the end of this, you'll understand why I felt like my whole world was slipping through my fingers, and why this story isn't just about a family torn apart. It's about the frightening question we all dread. What if the people we love the most are not who we think they are? I want you to imagine this with me, just for a second. Your wife, the woman who has been your rock, the mother of your child, suddenly looking at your daughter as if she's a stranger. The way she speaks, the tone in her voice, it's cold, distant, and almost desperate. She's not angry or upset. She's scared, like someone who's caught in a nightmare they can't wake from. And the worst part? She keeps telling me over and over, the real one is gone. This isn't our daughter. Those words haunted me in ways I can't even describe. At first, I thought maybe it was the stress of life catching up, new jobs, sleepless nights, or maybe she was just overwhelmed. But then, the way she described our daughter's mannerisms, her memories, even little things only a mother would notice, didn't add up to the girl who was growing up in our home. It was as if two different people were sharing the same body, and my wife was convinced that the one she loved was missing somewhere, trapped, replaced, or lost to something far beyond my understanding. You might be wondering right now, is this some kind of medical issue? Could it be dementia or some rare psychological condition? I thought the same thing at first, and trust me, we checked everything. Doctors, specialists, you name it. But no diagnosis could explain what my wife was saying or the strange incidents that followed. It wasn't just about recognition or memory. It felt like there was a hidden truth lurking beneath the surface, something terrifying and inexplicable that no one was prepared to face. And this is where the story gets even stranger, because the more I try to get answers, the more the pieces of this puzzle began to disappear. Important clues vanished, conversations changed, and some people around us started acting like they knew things they shouldn't. Suddenly, I wasn't just trying to help my wife or protect my daughter. I was caught in a web of secrets and lies that made me question everything I believed about family, trust, and reality itself. This story is not just mine. It's a journey that will make you question how well you really know the people closest to you. It's about love, loss, and the darkest corners of the human mind where reality and fear collide. As you watch this video, I want you to put yourself in my shoes. Imagine the helplessness of watching your wife drift away into a world that doesn't seem to exist for you, while your daughter remains the same on the outside but somehow different in a way you can't explain. The emotional turmoil, the sleepless nights, and the constant battle between hope and despair are something I never thought I'd experience, and yet here I am, sharing it with you because I know I'm not alone. There are families out there dealing with mysteries like this, and by sharing my story, I hope to shed light on what's often left unspoken, the invisible struggles, the silent fears, and the desperate search for truth that keeps us going even when everything feels lost. I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to tell you because every detail matters, from the first strange conversation with my wife to the little moments that didn't make sense until much later. The way our daughter's behavior shifted, the odd things she said, and the unexplained disappearances of photos and keepsakes that once meant everything to us. These aren't just random events, they're pieces of a larger mystery, one that forces you to ask questions no parent should ever have to consider. Is it possible that the child we love isn't who we think she is? Could there be something more sinister at play? Something beyond medical science and psychological explanations? And if so, how do you fight for your family when reality itself seems to be slipping away? As you watch, you'll meet the people who tried to help, the doctors, the therapists, even friends and family members, and see how their reactions ranged from disbelief to fear. You'll hear about the moments when my wife's eyes would clear, only to darken again with the same unsettling certainty that the real daughter was missing. And you'll understand why, despite every effort, the answers remain just out of reach, like a shadow slipping through your fingers in the darkest night. This story isn't just about what happened to us. It's about what it means to hold on when everything you know is challenged, and how love can be both a lifeline and a source of unbearable pain. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't a horror story or a supernatural thriller, though it sometimes feels like one. It's a real-life mystery wrapped in the most personal of battles. And it's one that I've decided to share with you, not because it's over or because I have all the answers, but because I believe that together, by opening up this conversation, we can find understanding, support, and maybe even hope. So, as you watch, keep your mind open and your heart ready, because the truth we're about to uncover might change everything you think you know about family, identity, and the fragile threads that hold us together. I know some of you might be watching this because you've experienced something similar, or you know someone who has. Others might be here because you love mysteries or are fascinated by stories that challenge reality. Wherever you fall, I invite you to stay with me till the very end. Trust me when I say the answers are worth it. And the more you watch, the deeper this story goes, peeling back layers of memory, love, and fear to reveal something that might just change how we see the people we hold dear. From the moment my wife first told me she didn't recognize our daughter anymore, my life became a twisted maze of questions with no clear answers. But before all this chaos, our life seemed almost ordinary, maybe even picture-perfect in a way that made the confusion all the more shocking. I want to take you back a little to the months leading up to this nightmare so you can understand how quickly things spiraled out of control and why this mystery feels so much deeper than anyone could imagine. In the months before my wife's chilling confession, I had been buried in work, chasing deadlines and trying to provide for my family like any dad would. The stress was high, but nothing out of the ordinary until strange things started slipping into our daily routine. Small moments at first, easily brushed off, but enough to stir an uneasy feeling inside me. There were times when my wife seemed distant, her eyes clouded with a heaviness I couldn't explain. She became secretive, locking herself in our bedroom for long stretches, and when I asked, she said she was just overwhelmed or tired. Our daughter, usually the bubbly, energetic girl who loved to draw and sing, suddenly began acting oddly. Sometimes she wouldn't respond when called, or she'd make strange comments about another place or someone waiting. I remember one evening when she told me, "Daddy, I think Mommy is confused." She doesn't remember the stories I told her yesterday. It was unsettling, but I tried to convince myself it was just childhood imagination, nothing more. But then the cracks started to show in ways I couldn't ignore. My wife's recognition of our daughter wasn't just off, it was missing entirely. She insisted that the little girl in our home wasn't our child at all, that the real daughter was gone, replaced by some kind of imposter. At first, I thought maybe this was a result of postpartum depression or some trauma I wasn't aware of, but the more I listened, the more I realized this was something else, something darker. I reached out to family and friends, hoping someone might have noticed something I missed. That's when the web began to unravel. There were whispers I hadn't paid attention to before, comments from neighbors about a strange woman seen lurking around our home, unexplained noises at night that we all pretended didn't exist, and even cryptic messages left on our voicemail from unknown numbers. Each of these clues seemed disconnected at first, but together they painted a picture I wasn't ready to confront. In the midst of all this, a few people in our circle started to feel suspicious. There was my wife's old college friend, someone who had recently reappeared in her life after years of silence. At first, their renewed connection seemed innocent, just old friends catching up, but then odd things happened. My wife would receive late-night calls, sometimes whispering conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. I asked about them, but her answers were vague, almost rehearsed. Then there was the nanny we hired last year to help with our daughter's after-school routine. She seemed kind and trustworthy, but one day I found her going through my wife's things when she thought no one was watching. When confronted, she claimed she was just organizing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she let on. To add to the confusion, some of my wife's coworkers began acting strangely, avoiding eye contact and giving me sideways glances during chance encounters. Were they hiding something? Were they part of whatever was happening behind closed doors? As if that wasn't enough, our home itself started to feel less safe. Objects would be misplaced, pictures of our daughter would go missing or be replaced with older, faded photos that no one could explain. I even found a locked box hidden in the attic, filled with letters and old photographs that hinted at a past my wife never talked about. These pieces of her history were like puzzle fragments that didn't fit with the woman I thought I knew. Slowly, the mystery began to shift from something medical to something far more personal and possibly sinister. But here's where it gets even stranger. Despite all the evidence piling up, when I tried to share these concerns with others, I was met with disbelief, or worse, warnings to stay out of things I didn't understand. Friends would change the subject or brush off my questions, and family members who used to be close suddenly seemed distant or uncomfortable. It was as if there was an unspoken rule that some truths were better left buried. I remember one particular night that sealed my determination to find out the truth. My wife woke up screaming, tears streaming down her face, shouting our daughter's name but calling her someone else entirely. The fear in her voice was raw, and it shook me to my core. When I held her and asked what was wrong, she whispered a name I didn't recognize and said, "She's not ours anymore. She never was." That moment was a turning point, not just because it was heartbreaking, but because it made me realize I couldn't rely on the people around me or the answers I expected. I had to dig deeper, no matter the cost. What followed were endless nights researching, reaching out to specialists, and trying to connect dots that seemed deliberately scattered. I uncovered old news stories about families with similar experiences, some involving kidnappings, others tangled in mysteries of identity and memory. I spoke to psychologists who spoke of rare dissociative disorders and trauma-induced memory loss, but none could explain the certainty in my wife's voice or the strange behaviors our daughter exhibited. And then there were the moments that felt like something straight out of a thriller, a shadow seen from the corner of my eye, a sudden blackout of time, and whispered voices when we were supposed to be alone. I began to question everything I thought was real, and the question haunting me became, who can I trust when the person I love most can no longer tell the difference between truth and illusion? The more I try to explain, the more tangled this gets. Is my wife suffering from a condition we don't understand? Or is there something else, something darker, that's swallowing our family whole? Was our daughter truly replaced? Or is this the mind's desperate way of protecting itself from a trauma too big to face? The answers aren't easy, and as you watch this video, you'll start to see why no single theory fits perfectly. You'll meet the suspects, the red herrings, the unexpected players who seem to appear and disappear like ghosts in our lives. You'll hear stories from those closest to us who may be hiding pieces of the truth, and witness the moments when hope feels like a fragile thread ready to snap. This isn't just a story about a family in crisis. It's a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and shattered memories that pull you in deeper the more you try to escape. Just when I thought I was starting to piece together the truth, when a fragile thread finally seemed to connect my wife's fear to something real, it all slipped through my fingers again. The journal was the first real breakthrough I'd had. I found it hidden in the crawl space behind the old bookshelf in our bedroom, wrapped in an old scarf I didn't recognize. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary leather-bound notebook, the kind you pick up at a bookstore and never use. But inside were frantic handwritten pages, paragraphs scribbled in different inks, sometimes even scratched out, as if whoever wrote it was trying to both remember and forget at the same time. I'm convinced it was my wife's handwriting, though some parts looked shaky and distorted, almost as if written during moments of panic. The entries talked about someone watching the house at night, a man with no face in the backyard, and repeated references to the Mirror Girl, a name I had never heard before. She kept writing the same phrase, She looks like her, but she isn't her. It was a gut punch reading those pages. I had finally found something concrete that could explain why my wife believed our daughter wasn't who she seemed. But the very next morning, the journal was gone.
Just like that.
Vanished. At first, I thought maybe my wife had taken it back, that maybe she knew I'd found it and was trying to protect whatever secrets she had buried inside. But when I asked her, her eyes widened and she looked genuinely scared. Not angry. Not defensive. Just scared. She whispered, "They don't want you reading that. They never do." I didn't even have time to ask her who they were before she shut down, curling into herself and refusing to say another word. That was the first time I realized this might be bigger than us, bigger than our family. And maybe, just maybe, we were already in too deep. The tension only got worse from there. People I trusted started acting like strangers. One of my close friends, Matt, a guy I've known since college and who's been to every family barbecue for the last 5 years, started avoiding my calls. We had always been tight, the kind of friendship where you don't need to explain much because you just get each other. But ever since I told him about the missing journal and the things my wife was saying, he's been cold, distant, even rude. When I finally cornered him in person outside his office, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You need to stop. Whatever you think you're doing, it's not going to help anyone. Just take care of your wife and let this go." That's when I realized he knew something he wasn't telling me. Maybe he was involved. Maybe he had seen something and didn't want to be dragged into it. Or maybe someone got to him. I couldn't say. But one thing was clear, someone didn't want the truth coming out. The deeper I dug, the more it felt like the walls were closing in. I started having issues with my phone. Messages disappeared. Calls dropped suddenly. My laptop restarted on its own more than once, and files I had saved related to my wife's journal, including the photos I took of a few of its pages, were just gone. Completely wiped. And when I called the tech guy I trusted, he ran a diagnostics check and said something about a remote access breach which made my stomach sink. Who was watching us? Who was covering their tracks? It was clear I wasn't just chasing a personal mystery anymore. I was stepping into something dangerous. Then came the night I heard my daughter talking in her room long after bedtime. Normally, she sleeps like a rock, and the house is dead quiet after 9 p.m. But that night, I passed her room around midnight and heard her voice, whispering. Not just mumbling in her sleep, but having an actual conversation. When I opened the door, she was sitting up in bed, her eyes wide open, staring into the corner of the room where there was nothing but shadows. I asked her who she was talking to, and she just smiled and said, "The other girl." I felt every hair on my body stand on end. I asked what she meant, but she just lay back down like nothing happened and drifted off, as if she had no idea what she just said. The next morning, when I brought it up again, she looked confused and said she didn't remember talking to anyone. That same day, I got a message slipped under our front door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper. On it, in neat block letters, were 6 words. "You're looking in the wrong place." No name. No explanation. Just that. I stood there holding the note, heart racing, feeling more watched than I ever had before. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my wife's state of mind or even about my daughter's strange behavior. It was about me. Someone was trying to steer me away, control what I discovered, and when.
But why?
Why would anyone go to such lengths to cover up something that, to the outside world, looked like a simple case of mental illness or stress? I started thinking back to things I had overlooked. Conversations from years ago. Arguments my wife had with her mother that never made sense. A photo I once saw of her as a teenager, standing next to a girl who looked exactly like her, but slightly off. When I asked who the girl was, she told me it was just a cousin. But now I wonder if that was the first clue I missed. What if this started long before I ever came into her life? What if this wasn't about our daughter being different, but about something much older, deeper, and darker? One night, I dug through old storage boxes in the garage, looking for anything from my wife's past that could shed light on what she might be hiding. And that's when I found a small, unmarked VHS tape. No label, no date, just dust and plastic. I don't even know why we still had a player, but we did. I sat down, popped it in, and what I saw has been etched into my memory ever since. It was grainy home video footage. A child's birthday party. Balloons, cake, laughter. The camera jerking around clumsily as someone, probably her father, tried to film everything at once. But the moment that turned my blood cold was a shot of a little girl, no more than 5, standing in front of a mirror. She smiled. And then, for a fraction of a second, the reflection didn't move with her. It just stared. I paused the tape. Rewound. Played it again. Same thing. A tiny flicker, like a glitch in reality. I don't know if it was a trick of the tape, some sort of distortion, or something else entirely, but I knew right then that I had seen something I wasn't meant to. Something not even my wife had told me. And if that reflection wasn't her, then who is it? I wish I could tell you what it means. I wish I could say I found the answers I was looking for. But all I've found so far are locked doors, cryptic warnings, and a growing feeling that someone or something is always one step ahead of me. The journal, the messages, the missing files, my daughter's whispered conversations at night, they're not isolated incidents. They're pieces of a puzzle that someone is desperately trying to keep from being completed. And just when I thought I couldn't be more confused or scared, I got a call from someone I haven't heard from in over a decade. Someone who was part of my wife's life long before she met me. A voice I barely remembered, but one that said something that stopped me in my tracks. If you care about your daughter, stop asking questions.
You don't know what she really is.
I haven't told my wife about the call. Not yet. I don't know if I can. Because now I'm not even sure she'd want to know. The call haunted me for days. The voice, the warning, the chilling implication that my daughter might not be who or what I thought she was, kept replaying in my head like a looping nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate. Every sound in the house made me jump. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the stairs, even the rustle of leaves outside the window, it all felt amplified, like the world itself was watching me, listening, waiting for me to make the next move. I tried to shake it off, convince myself I was spiraling from stress, but deep down, I knew something had changed. This wasn't just paranoia. This was real. And then it got worse, because it wasn't just me anymore. My sister, Erica, who lives 2 states away and only visits once or twice a year, called me one morning in a panic. Her voice was shaky, trembling in a way I hadn't heard since our mother died. She told me someone left a package on her doorstep in the middle of the night. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in bold black letters across the top. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, an old one possibly from the 90s. It was a picture of me, her, and our parents at a theme park when we were kids. But what made her call me in tears was what was written on the back. It started with you. Protect her before it's too late. That was all. No explanation. No context. Just that eerie message in smudged red ink, like it had been written hastily, maybe even in blood. She asked me what it meant, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I had no words to offer. I couldn't lie to her, but I couldn't tell her the truth either, because even I didn't know what that truth was anymore. Erica's package changed everything. Until then, I thought whatever this was had its roots in my wife's past, or something happening in our home. But now it was reaching out, touching people who had nothing to do with it, at least not on the surface. It made me wonder, was this really about my daughter? Or was I somehow part of something I never realized? The more I thought about it, the more I remembered things from my childhood that didn't sit right. Memories of my father warning us never to go into the attic after dark, whispers between my parents late at night, and the time when I was 7 and went missing for almost an hour during a family trip. I had always chalked it up to getting lost in the crowd. But now, after everything that's happened, I started to wonder, did something happen back then that I wasn't supposed to remember? The questions multiplied like a storm with no end. I decided to retrace some of the events from the past few weeks, hoping to find something I'd overlooked. I returned to the attic where I found the journal, looking for any clue that might have been missed. But everything had been wiped clean, boxes rearranged, dust disturbed. Even the cobwebs looked fresh, like someone had deliberately erased all evidence of what was once hidden there. That's when I noticed a faint smell, something chemical almost like bleach or ammonia. Someone had been here. Someone had been covering their tracks. I felt it deep in my gut. I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. And then something happened that ripped away the last bit of calm I had left. Our neighbor, Mr. Halvorsen, an older man who had lived across the street since we moved in, was found dead in his home, an apparent suicide. That's what the report said. But I knew better. He was the one who had warned me weeks ago, in hushed tones, to keep my daughter away from the old walking trail behind the woods. He told me he'd seen something there, something wrong, something watching. I didn't take him seriously at the time. I thought maybe he was just a lonely man spinning ghost stories. But now he was gone, and I couldn't ignore the connection. I snuck into his backyard that same night, flashlight in hand, and found a strange set of footprints near the tree line. Bare feet. Small. Like a child's. But they led nowhere, just vanished in the middle of the clearing, like whoever left them simply disappeared into thin air. I don't know why, but I took a photo. It felt important, like proof of something even if I didn't understand it yet. My wife started to change too. Not the same way as before, where she was afraid or confused. This was different. She became withdrawn, her face blank, her voice dull, almost robotic. She moved through the house like a ghost, barely responding to me or our daughter. And then one night, I found her sitting in the dark in the living room, staring at the baby monitor. Our daughter hadn't been a baby in years. We hadn't used that monitor in ages. But she was holding it in her lap like it was still active, watching the small screen intently. When I asked her what she was doing, she didn't look at me. She just said, "She's coming back."
I didn't know what to say.
There was no one on the screen, just static. But she kept staring, her eyes wide and unblinking, like she was waiting for something or someone. The fear started bleeding into every part of my life. At work, I couldn't focus. Emails from unknown senders kept appearing in my inbox, messages with just a single phrase repeated. "You were warned." My boss pulled me aside, said my performance was slipping, that I seemed distracted. I wanted to scream at him that my entire life was unraveling, but what could I say? That I think my daughter might be someone or something else? That my wife talks to a blank baby monitor at night? That people are dying, and I'm getting messages from the past? Then the most terrifying thing of all happened. My daughter went missing for 6 hours. She was supposed to be at a school field trip, a simple visit to the Natural History Museum downtown. But when I arrived to pick her up, the teacher told me she had never gotten on the return bus. Panic doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. I tore through that museum, screaming her name, checking every corner, every hallway, every bathroom. I called the police. I called my wife. I called every parent on the trip. No one had seen her since lunch. And then, just when I thought I was about to lose my mind, I got a call from an unknown number. No voice. Just breathing. Then, after 10 long seconds, a child's whisper. "You found the wrong one." The line went dead. She was found 2 hours later, standing at the edge of our backyard woods.
Just standing there.
No scratches. No signs of struggle. She said she had been there the whole time, that she never left the group, that she didn't understand why everyone was so worried. I hugged her tight, but something about the way she held me felt off, like she was mimicking what she thought a child should do. Her grip was too strong. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And when I asked her where she had been, she just looked up at me and said, "I never left. You did." Something is coming. I can feel it in every breath I take. And whatever it is, it doesn't want to be found. Or maybe it already has been. Something shifted after that night. After I found my daughter standing at the edge of the woods with that eerie calm, that too perfect stillness in her eyes. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself, but something inside me began to unravel. I couldn't sleep without keeping one eye open. I started locking every door twice, sometimes 3 times, even the ones inside the house. I stopped trusting the silence in the rooms around me because I no longer believed it meant safety. The air itself felt charged with something invisible, like static just before a lightning strike. It was more than fear. It was a gnawing dread that crept into the spaces between my thoughts, tightening its grip on everything I believed to be real. And then it happened, something I had feared from the beginning but wasn't prepared to face. Erica, my sister, vanished. She was supposed to come visit, said she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong and needed to see us in person. She was only a few hours away. We spoke the night before her drive, and she promised to bring some old family tapes, hoping we could piece together something from the past that might explain all this. But she never made it. Her car was found abandoned off a service road near the county line, keys still in the ignition, her phone left on the passenger seat with the screen cracked like it had been stomped on. No signs of a struggle. No trace of her. Nothing. When the local sheriff's department called, they treated it like a standard missing person case, but I knew better. I knew this wasn't random. This was a warning. A message. And suddenly the weight of this whole thing became unbearable. Whatever I had stumbled into wasn't just unsettling anymore. It was lethal. And it was closing in. I started seeing things, or at least I think I did. Shadows that moved against the grain of light. Faces and reflections that didn't match the person standing in front of the mirror. I'd pass by my daughter's room and hear her talking to someone, only to find her alone, silent, staring at the wall like she'd just been caught doing something she shouldn't. And my wife, she was becoming more of a stranger each day. She no longer responded to my questions with real answers, just vague, cryptic phrases that left me more confused than before. Sometimes I'd catch her writing something on scraps of paper and burning them in the sink. When I asked her why, she said it was the only way to keep them from reading her thoughts. I didn't know who they were anymore. I didn't know if she was losing her mind, or if she was the only one in the house who actually knew what was going on. One night, after hours of trying and failing to sleep, I stepped outside for air. It was well past midnight, and the neighborhood was unnaturally quiet. I stood at the edge of the driveway, staring into the darkness beyond the trees, when I saw the headlights. Not moving, just sitting there. A black SUV, engine off, windows tinted, parked too far away to be coincidental. I stood there for several minutes, pretending to ignore it, but every hair on my body was standing straight. I felt watched in a way I hadn't since I was a kid hiding under the covers after a nightmare. When I finally walked toward it, the lights blinked once, and the engine roared to life. It sped off without a sound, vanishing around the corner before I could even think to grab a plate number. That's when I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was real surveillance, real threat. And it meant someone had decided I was getting too close to something I wasn't supposed to see. I started documenting everything: audio recordings, daily logs, hidden cameras inside the house. I told myself it was for protection, for evidence in case things got worse. But truthfully, it was the only thing keeping me grounded, the only proof I had that I wasn't imagining it all. And then came the break-in. Not loud, not violent, calculated. I came home from the store one afternoon, only gone 30 minutes, and something was off the moment I stepped through the door. My daughter's bedroom light was on, even though she was at school. The basement door was slightly ajar, even though we never go down there. And the drawer where I kept the USB drives with all my recordings, it was empty. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing stolen except the things that mattered. Someone had been inside. Someone who knew exactly what to look for and exactly how much time they had to take it. I confronted my wife that evening, desperate for any kind of answer. But instead of panic or denial, she just stared at me. And then, calmly, like she was talking about the weather, she said, "They needed to reset things. You were going off script." Off script. Like this was all some kind of show. Some kind of orchestrated nightmare that I was just a pawn in. I wanted to scream at her, shake her, demand she explain, but she was already turning away, humming a lullaby I didn't recognize, soft, eerie, almost ancient. Our daughter walked into the room moments later, and for a brief second, I saw something in her face, a twitch, a flicker, like a mask slipping. She looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, are you going to go missing too?" I nearly collapsed. The walls are closing in now. Every clue leads to more questions. Every answer feels like a lie. I've started to notice symbols, drawn in chalk behind furniture, scratched into the wood beneath my daughter's bed, etched faintly into the mirror behind condensation. I don't know what they mean, but they repeat in patterns like instructions or warnings. The deeper I go, the less I understand, and the more I fear that maybe I was never meant to solve this mystery. Maybe the truth is that some things aren't supposed to be uncovered. And the scariest part? I'm starting to believe they're right. I don't know who to trust anymore. My wife is slipping into a reality I can't follow. My daughter, if she's my daughter, knows more than she lets on. The people who should be helping me are either silent, gone, or turning against me. And I can feel it in my bones now. Something is watching me from behind the veil of this world, pulling strings I can't see, waiting for the moment I finally give up trying to understand. But I can't stop. I won't stop. Not until I find out what happened to Erica. Not until I know what my wife meant by reset. Not until I uncover what's hiding behind my daughter's smile. Because now I know this isn't just about protecting them, it's about surviving long enough to face whatever's coming next. And whatever it is that's already here. I didn't sleep the night the symbols started moving. That's the only way I can describe it. They shifted. Not physically, but in the way a dream rearranges itself the moment you wake up. The markings under the bed, behind the mirror, in the chalk on the basement floor, they were suddenly different. Not in shape, but in placement. Like something or someone was reconfiguring them while I wasn't looking. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation, trauma, stress, they all play tricks on the mind. But when I opened my laptop and checked the security cam footage I had set up after the break-in, my heart dropped. There were gaps, hours of footage erased, replaced with static. And buried in the middle of one corrupted file, just for a split second, was a still frame of my daughter standing in the hallway at 3:12 a.m., staring directly into the lens. Smiling. And behind her, just barely visible, was my sister Erica, expressionless, standing in the shadows. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, frozen. It couldn't be her. She was gone, missing for weeks. And yet there she was, right behind my daughter, in our home, without a trace of ever being there. That's when I realized I'd missed something. Something massive. I went back through every recording, every photo, every voicemail and page of the burned journal that I had managed to salvage. I'd been looking at everything like it was a haunting or a psychological collapse. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if the people who were disappearing weren't being taken away, but were somehow being pulled through? The idea sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. People weren't just vanishing. They were appearing again. Wrong. Out of place, like copies left under flickering light. I took the still image of Erica and drove 3 hours to visit a man I hadn't seen in almost 10 years, Dr. Nathaniel Carr, a professor of folklore and alternate perception studies, someone my wife had briefly studied under during her early college years before she dropped out without explanation. I had always thought he was just another eccentric academic lost in his own theories, but in that moment, he was the only person I believed might understand what I had witnessed. When I showed him the photo, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he asked me one question. Asterisk, have you ever heard of mirroring? Asterisk, I nodded vaguely, thinking he meant something psychological. But he shook his head. Not in your mind. In reality. Places where things reflect, but don't quite match. Echoes of people, moments, entire timelines that loop just slightly off kilter. You're not just dealing with a mystery, my friend. You're dealing with a breach. I wanted to dismiss him. I wanted so badly to reject the idea that my family's nightmare was tied to something cosmic and terrifying, something that couldn't be explained through reason or science. But I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what came next. Because just as I stood to leave his office, thanking him with a numb, desperate sort of politeness, he stopped me and placed a folded piece of paper in my hand. On it was a printout of an email, dated almost 6 months before any of this began. It was from my wife.
To him.
The subject line read, asterisk, I think it's happening again. Asterisk, and in the message, she wrote something that shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about our daughter, about the life we had built. She came back, the message read. But it isn't the same one. I don't know how to explain it. She remembers the same things. She knows the same stories. But she's colder. Like something is wearing my daughter's skin. I sat in my car, clutching that paper, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. My wife had known. Not just about the changes. She'd seen them before. This wasn't the first time. Which meant everything she had said, the whispers, the mirror girl, the lullabies to the baby monitor, weren't madness. They were memories. Fragments of a secret she'd buried so deep, she didn't even trust me with it. And worse, it meant that the little girl sleeping in my house, calling me daddy, looking like my daughter, might not be the same child I held in the delivery room 8 years ago. I rushed home, the paper crushed in my fist, the truth unraveling in my head like threads being yanked from the seams of reality. And when I walked through the door, I found my wife sitting in the kitchen with someone I hadn't seen in years, her old friend Alexis, the one who'd reappeared quietly in her life months ago and had always felt just slightly off. They stopped talking when they saw me, as if I had walked in on something sacred. I looked at Alexis, then at my wife, and demanded to know what was going on. What this was. What she was. And that's when Alexis smiled in a way I will never forget, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, one that split too wide and lingered too long. She told you, didn't she? She said softly. Or maybe you figured it out on your own. Either way, it doesn't matter now. It's already begun. My wife didn't meet my eyes. She just whispered, I try to stop it, but it always finds a way back. And in that moment, I realized the people around me had known more than they ever let on. That Alexis wasn't just a friend, and this wasn't just some strange phenomenon invading our lives. It was a pattern, a cycle, something that had happened before and would happen again. Something that didn't just mimic the people we loved, it replaced them. I looked at my daughter, playing quietly on the floor in the next room, humming the same lullaby I had heard my wife whisper into that dead baby monitor. And for the first time in my life, I felt true terror, not because I didn't know what she was, but because I finally understood that the thing wearing my daughter's face might not be the only one. And if that was true, if others had already been replaced, then I had been living among strangers for far longer than I ever realized. There comes a point when fear stops being a warning and becomes a companion, silent, patient, always breathing down the back of your neck. That was the place I found myself in now, trapped in a home where I no longer trusted the faces I saw every day, trapped in a life where the simplest choices now carried the weight of irreversible consequences. The silence between me and my wife grew louder with every hour. There were no more attempts at pretending everything was normal. She had stopped asking me where I was going. I had stopped asking her what she was hiding. We both knew the answers would only dig the grave deeper. But the moment I realized the truth had a price, and that price might be our daughter, or whatever was in her place, I knew something had to break. And soon. That night, I stood outside her room for almost 20 minutes, my hand hovering just over the doorknob, trying to summon the courage to do what I had never allowed myself to do before. Ask her point blank who she really was. The child inside that room looked like my daughter, spoke like her, even smelled like her after a day at school. Warm skin and cheap cafeteria soap. But I could no longer deny that something beneath that familiar shell was off. Too precise. Too perfect. Like a movie playing on a loop, repeating all the right scenes in the wrong order. I finally opened the door and sat beside her bed. She looked up at me with those impossibly wide eyes that held no trace of fear or confusion, just quiet expectation. And I asked her as gently as I could, do you remember who you were before the woods? For a second, I thought she would laugh, tell me I was being silly, crawl into my lap like she used to. But instead, she stared at me without blinking and said, do you? It was like a punch to the soul. The next morning, everything escalated. There was a knock on the door at sunrise, Alexis, standing calmly, holding a single black envelope in her hand. She didn't try to come inside. She didn't speak. Just handed it to me and walked away, disappearing down the street like she had never been there at all. Inside the envelope was a location, coordinates, to be exact, followed by a single line of text that felt like a noose tightening around my throat. You can choose to forget, or you can choose to lose her forever. No context. No signature. Just a choice. And it was clear what they meant. Whatever I found at those coordinates would be the truth, the real truth. But getting it meant sacrificing everything I had left. My family, my home, possibly even my mind. Staying meant accepting the lie and living in it, protecting the creature that now wore my daughter's face, pretending it was still her, pretending it hadn't already replaced something precious and irreplaceable. I was paralyzed. I walked the neighborhood for hours, trying to think. I watched kids play in yards, heard parents calling them inside, and realized I might be the only person in this entire town who knew the mask the world wore was cracking. And then my phone buzzed. It was a video message. No sender. Just a thumbnail of a dimly lit room. I opened it, hands trembling. The footage showed a girl, my daughter, but not the one in my home. This one looked scared, dirty, tear-streaked. She was tied to a chair in a room I didn't recognize, whispering my name over and over, like a prayer to a God who never answers. And just before the video ended, a hand reached out toward her face, and the screen cut to black. I dropped the phone. My knees buckled. I couldn't breathe. The realization hit me like ice in the lungs. There were two of them. The one I had raised, and the one who had taken her place. And I had been living with the wrong one for weeks, maybe longer. The grief didn't come all at once. It settled in slowly, like fog creeping under a door. Because now I had no idea what I was supposed to do. If I followed the coordinates, I might find her, the real her. But what would I find guarding her? What would I have to trade? And if I confronted my wife, forced her to tell me everything she had buried, would it shatter the last fragile pieces of our family? Or had it already shattered, and I was just the last to notice? The next few hours were a blur. I watched the same video over and over, memorizing the wallpaper in the background, the sound of distant traffic, the muffled cries. I searched local maps, trying to trace the coordinates. They led to an abandoned estate just outside town, one of those old family properties nobody ever visits anymore, lost to time and legal disputes. I knew if I went there, I might not come back. But I also knew I couldn't live one more night under the same roof with something that smiled like my daughter but wasn't. I packed a bag. I wrote a letter. And then, at the last moment, I paused because I saw her again. My wife. Sitting at the kitchen table.
Crying.
Holding a photo of our daughter on her first birthday. Real, raw pain on her face. And that's when I knew the cruelest truth of all. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was a victim. Just like me. She hadn't invited this darkness into our home. She had tried to keep it out. But it had come anyway. And now we were both trapped by it, clinging to the memory of a child we could no longer be sure existed in the way we remembered. I walked up to her, placed the envelope on the table, and asked her one question. What happened the first time this started? She looked at me, eyes hollow, and whispered, I made a choice and I chose wrong. And with that, I understood. I had been given the same choice now. Safety or truth. Lie or reality. The girl who smiled in the living room, or the one crying in the dark. And I still didn't know which one was really mine. The drive to the estate felt like a descent into another world, a slow, dreadful unraveling of everything I'd once called real. The road twisted deeper into the woods, narrowing to a single dirt path choked with overgrown branches and the sickly sweet scent of rot. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tight they ached, but I couldn't let go. I kept hearing my daughter's voice from the video echoing in my mind, so familiar, so broken. Her whisper carried a weight that shattered every doubt. The real one was still out there, and I had waited too long. By the time the estate came into view, an enormous, decaying house swallowed by ivy and shadow, it felt less like I had arrived somewhere and more like the place had been waiting for me, expecting me. The air was colder here, unnaturally so. The kind of chill that didn't touch your skin but coiled around your spine. I stepped out of the car, every footstep crunching the gravel like a countdown. The place was silent, but not empty. That silence was full, like a held breath that went on too long. I pushed open the door, unlocked, of course, and stepped inside. The house smelled of damp wood and old secrets. Dust hung thick in the air, undisturbed for years, and yet, there were footprints. Small ones. A child's. They led through the hall, into the back of the house, down into the basement. I followed, heart in my throat, every step heavier than the last. As I descended, I heard it, soft humming. The same lullaby my wife used to sing when our daughter couldn't sleep. The same melody I'd heard from the baby monitor. But it wasn't my wife singing. It was colder.
Hollow.
Mechanical, like someone trying to imitate warmth. I reached the bottom and found a long corridor, lit by flickering bulbs overhead. At the end of it was a door, slightly ajar, and from within came a flickering, pale blue light. I pushed it open and saw her, my daughter, tied to a chair, just like in the video. Her eyes were red from crying, her lips chapped, her tiny wrists bruised. But she was alive. Real. And the moment our eyes met, she whispered, "Dad?" That one word nearly broke me. I rushed toward her, but then came the voice, calm, clear, unnervingly close. "She isn't yours anymore." I turned and saw Alexis standing in the shadows, her face devoid of anything human. She stepped forward, and the mask slipped, not physically, but something in her expression fractured. Like whatever was pretending to be her could no longer hold the shape. Behind her, more figures emerged, blurry at first, then sharpening into people I recognized. People who had vanished. Erica. Mr. Halvorsen. Even Matt, my old friend who had warned me to stop digging. But they weren't right.
They didn't move like people.
They didn't blink. And all of them were smiling that same impossible smile. Alexis circled me, slow and deliberate, speaking like she was explaining the weather. "This world is soft. Fragile. Easy to fold. We've crossed before, but your daughter, she was the doorway this time. The fracture. The echo." I felt myself unraveling, mentally recoiling from the implications. They weren't ghosts. They weren't demons. They were reflections. Not metaphorically, asterisk literally star. Something had torn through the fabric between realities, and these were the things that slipped through the cracks. They had been studying us, mimicking us, and now they were replacing us, perfectly, efficiently, one by one. And I had let it happen. Alexis stepped closer, placing a cold hand on my shoulder. "You still have a choice. You can leave her. Go home. Forget. Live in peace with the one we gave you. She'll love you. She'll be her. You won't know the difference. Or you can take her back. But we won't let you leave. Not whole." Behind her, the real ones, their prisoners, stood perfectly still, blinking slowly like dolls just starting to awaken.
It was an impossible choice.
Keep the lie, or fight for the truth and risk becoming part of their collection. But something inside me, something primal, rose to the surface. I thought of the night my daughter came home humming that song. I thought of the note left under the door, the black SUV, the journal, every thread leading to this moment. And I knew I couldn't live in a lie, even if the truth destroyed me. So I lunged for her, grabbed her, cut her free with a knife I had kept hidden in my boot since this nightmare began. The lights overhead flickered violently, the others screaming, not with rage, but with static, like television signals caught in a storm. We ran. Through the corridor. Up the stairs. Back into the woods. The house began to shake behind us, groaning like it was alive, like it knew it had been broken. The forest bent in impossible ways, trees twisting and folding like paper trying to unwrite itself. But we didn't stop. Not until the car was in sight. Not until we were miles away, driving into a dawn that didn't feel like safety, just distance. But here's the twist. That night, after we made it home, I tucked her into bed. I kissed her forehead. I watched her fall asleep. I should have felt relief. I should have cried. But I didn't. Because something was wrong. Not wrong like before, not off. But too perfect. Her room was exactly as we left it. The toy she had broken 2 years ago was fixed. The scar on her chin from her bike fall was gone. And when I asked her what her favorite movie was, our favorite, we used to watch it every Christmas, she smiled and said, "I don't think we've seen that one, Daddy." I stood frozen at her door, heart sinking, because maybe I hadn't brought back the real one. Maybe there was no real one left. Or maybe the thing I had saved wasn't trying to escape. Maybe it had just been waiting for me to open the door. I used to think the worst kind of fear was the fear of the unknown, the creeping unease that settles in your chest when something doesn't make sense, when the people around you begin to feel like strangers, when the child you raise starts to smile like someone else. But I was wrong. The worst kind of fear is realizing that you may never truly know what's real again. That no matter how far you run or how many answers you claw out of the dark, some truths are designed to warp, to slip through your fingers the second you think you've grasped them. After that night at the estate, after tearing through dimensions I didn't even understand just to bring my daughter home, I believed for a fleeting moment that I had won. That love, stubborn and stupid as it is, had triumphed. But peace, I've learned, is not always the prize for survival. Sometimes survival is the punishment. In the weeks that followed, I tried to settle back into life. I returned to work, cooked dinner, took walks, went through the motions of normalcy, like a man clinging to the edge of a dream he's desperate not to wake from. My daughter, this version of her, fit too easily into our lives. She remembered enough to play the part, but every now and then, the seams showed. A glance too long, a phrase slightly out of place. And every time I noticed, she would watch me with those eyes that looked exactly like hers, but not. It wasn't fear that kept me from saying anything. It was the possibility, the whisper of hope, that maybe I was wrong. That maybe trauma and exhaustion had twisted my memory. That maybe this really was her, changed by what she'd been through, different but still mine. And for a while, I chose to believe that. I let the lie wrap around me like a warm blanket in a cold room. Because what else could I do? Tear her away again? Risk losing her forever in pursuit of a truth that might only bring more pain? My wife and I didn't talk much about what happened. There were too many fractures between us now, silent acknowledgments of the things we'd seen, the choices we'd made. She had once chosen the lie to protect me. Now I had done the same to protect us both. We found a new rhythm, the kind couples fall into when they know they can't return to what they were, but aren't quite ready to let go. We smiled at family dinners. We laughed at her school recitals. We played the roles life demanded. And behind our eyes, we carried the weight of a world no one else knew existed. We were survivors of something unspeakable, and we bore the scars in silence. But the story didn't end there. Late one night, months after everything had seemingly returned to normal, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in a careful, childlike scrawl. Inside was a VHS tape. No markings. No note. Just a single tape. Old and worn. I had to dig out an old player from the attic just to watch it. When the screen flickered to life, I expected horror. I expected shadows and screams. But instead, it was a home video, grainy footage of my daughter, no older than 4, playing in our backyard. The real one. I recognized the little mole on her wrist, the missing tooth, the way she ran with her arms flailing. My breath caught in my throat. The tape continued. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories. It was her. She was real. And this was proof. But near the end of the tape, the footage changed. The camera was pointed at a mirror. And in the reflection, I saw something impossible. I was standing behind her, but I wasn't. It was someone wearing my face, watching her with a blank expression, while the real me, camera in hand, shook as if fighting back tears. She turned toward the mirror and smiled, unaware of what stood behind her. And then the screen went black. I sat there for hours after the tape ended, unable to move. Because now I understood. It hadn't just been her that was replaced. I had been too. Maybe not entirely. Maybe not at once. But somewhere along the line, something had stepped into my life. Into me. I thought I had been saving my daughter, protecting my family. But maybe I was just following a script written by something far more powerful, far more ancient than I ever imagined. A cycle that doesn't stop. A mirror that doesn't just reflect, but recruits. In the end, I chose to keep the tape hidden. Not out of fear, but out of mercy. Because some truths don't set you free. They break you. And I realized I would rather live in a world where I could still hear my daughter's laughter, still hold her hand as we crossed the street, still pretend, even if I knew the truth behind the curtain. Not every monster shows its teeth. Some were the faces we love most. And some of us, those who survive long enough, learn to love them back. So now I live in that space between knowing and not knowing, between truth and denial. Every morning I wake up, look in the mirror, and wonder if the reflection staring back is really mine. Sometimes I think I catch a flicker, an almost imperceptible delay, like the glass remembering who I used to be. But I smile. I shave. I drink my coffee. I kiss my daughter goodbye as she walks to school. Because the world is still turning. The sky is still blue. And the people I love are still here. Or, at least, something wearing their skin is. And if you're watching this, if you've followed the story all the way to the end, then I have one question for you. When was the last time you really looked at the people around you? Because sometimes, the most terrifying things aren't hiding in the dark. Sometimes, they're sitting across the dinner table smiling,